Hi, everybody. My name's Eben Myers. I'm VP of Design at Simcoach Games. We design educational games or transformational games for mostly for grown-ups to help people learn new skills and change their behaviors. I wanted to do a couple of slides real quick just to introduce myself and the company, and then I'm going to spend most of the session actually playing our game. I'd like this to be relatively informal, so if people have questions or comments, just feel free to shout it out and we can adjust on the fly. So just a little bit of background on me. I am trained as an artist. I did my undergrad in sculpture, but I went to a liberal arts college where I studied design, philosophy, psychology, and actually came very close to minoring in computer science. So I sort of have done a lot of different things sort of in this collision of art and technology, which makes my attending the ETC probably not too surprising. So this was over 10 years ago now. I graduated from the ETC, where I had done things like building a networked virtual reality Lego race game, early augmented reality, pre-iPhone. You can see we built a location-based game in which you used a laptop on a cart. We did all kinds of fun things. After that, I worked for a lab that did education and public outreach for NASA missions, working with the Mars rovers, as well as rover projects coming out of CMU. And then I joined a company that at the time was named Etc. Edutainment and is now Simcoach Games. So just a quick sort of synopsis here. We design and develop video games that enable learners to achieve sustainable behavior change. So learning and behavior change are two of our big buzzwords, and then sustainable is also really important to us. To put it simply, we make learning simple, interactive, and measurable. So these are things that we use to guide our design process at every step of the way. We, over the years, and this is not rocket science, but we've decided, we have discovered, we have learned through the process of building things that there are a number of principles that underlie good game design that also underlie good learning. This is supported by a lot of research that's done here at CMU and in other places. We've sort of enumerated these in 5 high-level ideas: goals, participation, practice, feedback, and consequences. And I'm going to talk about a game that we developed specifically in relation to 3 of these things: the idea of goals, the idea of practice, and the idea of consequences. So the specific game I'm going to be sharing today is a game that we built for the Allegheny Health Network, a hospital system here in Pittsburgh. This is a game called Caregiver. It's about patient satisfaction and how nurses can help make that happen. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the game. Cool. So Caregiver is a game that's played by nurses. It is intended to communicate some basic skills for customer service. We were a little worried that some of these would be sort of insultingly simple, but these are things that tend to get lost in a nurse's day-to-day life. Nurses are really busy all the time, as many of you may know. And they're incredibly task-driven. So they're bouncing from thing to thing, constantly being interrupted by patients requesting new things, by doctors asking for things, by other nurses asking for things. And so it's really easy to forget the little things. And most nurses would say that they really do care about the patients, but sometimes it's easy to forget to show that. So this is a game where you get to practice those things in the context of a busy day. So I'm going to just really quickly, up front for our players, we enumerate all of our learning objectives. These are, it looks like quite a few, but really they fall into 2 big categories. One of which is treating patients with integrity and respect, and the other is setting expectations and then meeting them. And so that comes down to things like always knocking before you enter a patient's room. Seems simple, but when you're busy, really, really easy to forget to do it. Other things like introducing yourself with your name and your role, asking patients how they want to be referred to, and then using their name when you talk to them. On the expectation side, it's things like setting expectations in terms of, I'm going to respond to a call bell within 5 minutes. So if you hit that call bell button, it's not necessarily going to be immediate response, but you will get a response within 5 minutes. The other thing is, once you've set that expectation, you need to meet it. So the game gives you a chance to practice these things in a context where you're busy and running every which way. When I talked about goals, this game has a score. So your goal is to get a high score and to keep your patient satisfied along the way. We have a little intro and tutorial. We have Amy Jones here, who's the head nurse, who's going to introduce you to the unit. Oh, sorry, her name is Teresa. You are Amy Jones. I am Amy Jones. So we have a little patients tab here. We can see who our patients are. We can see that Mr. Harry Cooper here has a very low patient satisfaction in room 1. Mr. Michael Reed has a very high one, and my other 2 patients have middle of the road satisfactions. I'm going to skip the tutorial just for expediency here. Our guide nurse here is going to introduce one last thing, which is the call bells. So she's going to take care of that one, and now it's my turn to play. So you see, we have sort of your key metrics. These are your goals down here. Your score, of course, is a really important one. This is your overall patient satisfaction. This is your timer. So this is a time-based game because time pressure is something that is very real in nurses' lives, day-to-day work. So I'm going to start by going to visit Mr. Harry Cooper. So right off the bat, you see I have a choice. I can just barge right into the room, or I can knock. So I'm going to knock. That's something that increases his satisfaction just a little bit. Here we have some dialogue options. So I'm going to say, I'm going to think about these, or what am I going to say? Even this option here, where it's saying, "Hello, I'm your nurse. I'll be taking care of you." Obviously, that's not like you're not barging in and insulting people. But that is actually the least preferable option because A, you're not using their name, you're not using your name, and you're not asking how they want to be referred to. So the correct choice is, "Hello, Mr. Cooper, Mrs. Cooper, my name is Amy, and I'll be your nurse today. Is it all right if I call you Mr. and Mrs. Cooper?" So that choice there is the right one. We get a little feedback saying that helps make him happy. He's not happy in general, though. He says, "I don't care what you call me, as long as you tell me when I can get out of here. None of the other lame brains in this place seem to be able to tell me." So then we can answer here. Let's see. In this case, we'll say your whiteboard doesn't have a discharge time on it yet, but we'll let you know as soon as possible when you're expected to be discharged. That was sort of the neutral answer. His wife sort of interrupts here and says, "Harry, they'll let you come home as soon as you're well enough." So she's kind of helping you out. And then we have, we'll say, "It's all right, Mrs. Cooper. No one wants to be in the hospital. If you need something, Mr. Cooper, press that call bell. Someone will be here to answer it within 5 minutes." In this answer, basically you have a few different things going on. You're using his name, so that's good. You're setting the expectation of the call bell and how long it will take to answer it. "I'm not a moron. I know how to use a stupid call bell." Okay. "Harry, there's no need to be rude." And then before I leave, I'm going to ask him if there's anything else he needs. And if he needs anything, I'll push that stupid button. So we'll go ahead and leave the room. Before we leave the room, one of the other things we're going to do is check the whiteboard. One of the things that nurses have to do is keep that whiteboard updated. It's a tool for communication between nurses, but also between the nurse and the patient's family. I don't know how many of you have been in the hospital. In my experience, nobody ever touches that thing, and it has information on it that's hours, if not days, out of date, and that's frustrating as a patient. If that gets updated, it becomes useful. It becomes something that can be helpful to the patient's stay, make people feel more comfortable, and so on. So here we've abstracted that whole process down to just clicking a button. But again, you have to remember to do that in the context of all these other things you're doing. So here I've spent long enough in there that there's actually already a call bell on. So I'll go check on this person. I'm going to knock. So I mentioned consequences. One of the great things about a game is games have consequences. And so, a lot of times when we're working with people who want to train employees for this thing or that thing, they really want to focus on the right behaviors. And one of the things that we typically try to get to the bottom of is what happens when you do the wrong behavior. Also, what happens when you do the right behavior? So not just what is the right behavior, but what happens as a result of that. And so here, I'm going to choose the wrong thing here. Hello, what can I do for you? We get a little sort of immediate feedback saying she's unhappy, but no, she tells you what she wants. She wants a blanket. So there's sort of, we're giving you a little bit of feedback about that, but then also moving on. So, all right, and we'll leave the room. So for her, we didn't check the whiteboard. We didn't use her name. We didn't do any of these things. And if you look, her patient satisfaction is getting lower. So I'll go get her a blanket. So the other thing about this is the scoring mechanism. So you score when you complete tasks. So again, a nurse's job is very focused on tasks. And so we want to have that be sort of the primary mechanism for earning points. However, your score is multiplied by the patient satisfaction when you complete that task. So if you're doing a good job with the patient satisfaction, you get a much higher score. Therefore, again, that goal and the consequences become much more important. So let's see. Here's that blanket. We get our score. Her satisfaction was pretty low, so we only get a small satisfaction bonus. That goes up to 5, so I could have earned 1,000 points for that. And we'll leave the room. See, the consequences here are to my score, my overall satisfaction. I've lost time. And I'm moving on based on that. So let's see. Right now, okay, I can see now that Mr. Cooper's IV bag needs to be replaced. So you can see right now this is pretty low key. I'm doing about one thing at a time. More experienced nurses who've played this say it's actually too easy, that we don't cause enough problems for people. First-year nurses who are really the sort of primary target of this do find it a little more challenging and find, particularly as things start to layer on top of each other, they find that it does provide a nice practice. The other thing is Mr. Cooper here, who's super grumpy, people asked for more of that. They're like, patients are often really grumpy with us, and that's pretty realistic. So that was nice to hear. So there, I just replaced his IV bag. This takes 5 minutes of game time. His satisfaction is getting up there, so I earned a pretty good score on that one. And I will remind him to use the call bell if he needs anything and head out. So let's see. Okay, right now, nobody needs anything, so I'm going to go check on my patient in room 7. This is Mrs. Dawson. She's pretty unsatisfied, so I'm going to try and see if I can bring her satisfaction score up a little bit. So basically what we tried to do with this is match every single one of those learning objectives to an interaction. And so many of them are about the conversations you have with the patient, but things like checking the whiteboard, timeliness, knocking, have specific actions in the interface themselves. So let's see, she's okay being called Mrs. Dawson. So I'm going to set her expectations about the call bell. And then let's see, I'll ask if I can get her anything else before I go. And head out of the room, and before I go, I'll check that whiteboard. Now, let's see. Nobody needs anything right now. I'm going to go check on Ms. Sarver in room 4. I'm still not doing particularly well. My overall patient satisfaction is right in the middle. So again, looking at the sort of the feedback that I'm getting in relation to the goal that I have, both in terms of my sort of concrete goal of increasing patient satisfaction, but my sort of exterior goal of earning a high score. So here I haven't met Ms. Sarver yet, so I'm going to ask if it's okay if I call her Ms. Sarver, and this is her fiance, Ben. One of the things you want to do as a nurse is address the family members too. So in this case, I could ignore him and say, all right, and move on, or I can acknowledge him. So that's a good thing to do. Ask if she needs anything else. She's all right for now. Oh, but Ben has a question. Before you go, we're getting married in 2 months. Will Eileen be better in time? I don't want her to have to wear a sling in her wedding photos. And here, there's some sort of subtleties, but I'm going to pick her shoulder may take a while to heal. We'll do all we can to help her get healthy as soon as possible. Someone will be back to check on her in an hour. So I've gotten her satisfaction up a little bit. Meanwhile, let's see, I'll go check on Mr. Michael Reed in room 5 here. So what's interesting is, even though I don't have any explicit tasks right now, one of the things that nurses do is what's called rounding. And so this is essentially sort of an emergent property of this is that when I don't have anything to do, I tend to do rounding. And so it's kind of a nice analog to the way the nurses actually play or actually proceed in real life. So we'll check with Mr. Reed. We'll see how he's doing. We'll set his expectations about the call bell. Can I get you anything? He's all right for now. Check the whiteboard, head out. Now I've got a call bell. Okay, so this is where things start to get tough. So I'm going to go check on that call bell. I am starting to do a little better on the patient satisfaction, but my time is ticking down here. Here I am, so this is Mr. Cooper. I can address him and his wife and see what can I do for you? What does a guy have to do to get something to eat around here? Harry, be polite. Amy will get you something, I'm sure, but only if you ask nicely. All right, so we can see what he wants. Do you like apple pie? Or sorry, applesauce, just some applesauce. A man can't live on that. Harry, that's enough. Applesauce would be wonderful, Amy, thank you so much. It's my pleasure, Mrs. Cooper. I'll be right back with that for you. Check the whiteboard. What we found with nurses is that even that simple act of checking the whiteboard every time they're in the room is useful in terms of reminding them to do that. So now I have a problem because I have to go get Mr. Cooper his snacks. Mr. Reed needs his vitals taken, and room 7 now has a call bell on. And so everything I do takes time, so I have to sort of figure out how to balance this. So it was important to us in this case to focus on an environment that really respected what nurses go through. We felt like if you had a game that just focused around performing these actions sort of without a context, that becomes pretty hollow pretty quickly. Whereas if you say, we understand that you're busy and you have to balance all these things, and we are presenting some techniques that, while on the surface they may feel like extra things you need to do, actually help you manage that whole situation, then we feel like that is actually a more effective experience. And again, with our playtesting, we've seen that is in fact the case. So let's see. So I think that was wrong. Well, I clicked it too fast to not look at the other options, but I think there was some subtle difference between that and one of the other options. It may have been using his name or something along those lines. Let's see. So I can actually blow her off and not take her to the restroom. But of course, using her name, saying it would be my pleasure, it's good, so I'll do that. This unfortunately takes a long time, so when I get back out, things are going to be kind of in bad shape. Thanks again. You're welcome, Miss Dawson. Is there anything else I can do for you? All right. So now, because that took 10 minutes, I actually have a call bell that went off while I was in there, and it's now exceeded its 5 minutes. So I violated one of my expectations that I set, which is the reality. And so in this case, this is not a totally unsalvageable situation. One of the learning objectives here is that when you are late, that you apologize. So, sorry you had to wait so long, what can I do for you? It's a little thing, but nurses have a tendency to run in and either act really busy so that it looks like there's a reason that you're late, whereas really the right thing to do is to come in, be forthright, apologize, and then move on and get them what they need. So in this case, we'll adjust the thermostat. My satisfaction bonus was a little lower because I was late, but I may have recouped a little bit there by apologizing well. And is there anything else I can get for you? No, you'll be all right. So I'm almost out of time here. I still need to get Mr. Cooper his snack. So let's see if I can do that before time runs out. I may not be able to. He's in room 1. Let's see, so again, I want to apologize for making him wait and ask, is there anything else I can get for you? I'm going to earn my points for this one. And he says, no, this will do. I'm afraid to ask you for anything else. Who knows if I'd ever get it. All right. And we'll check the whiteboard one last time, get those 100 points. And now here we are at the end of the game. Nurse Teresa came back. She's going to ask us how the first hour went. So she's going to now check up on the patient. So now this is, speaking of consequences, at the end of the game, you get to see what people thought of you. So you get to see the patient's perspective a little bit. So we reiterate the learning objective, interact with respect, integrity, and consistency. And we inform the patient of the next steps when leaving the room. And this guy's saying, my nurse always let me know what was going on before she left and reminded me about my call bell. I really appreciate it. It feels like she really cares. Mrs. Dawson. So in this case, this is a negative piece of feedback. She's observing that we used improper language with the patient. My nurse could have been more polite. I don't think she spoke to me very respectfully. In fact, that may have been the one that I went by so fast, as I may have used more informal language in that case. Ms. Sarver. She's noticing that I remembered to update the whiteboard. So because I was pretty good at that, I get some nice feedback saying that she really appreciated being kept in the loop. Mr. Cooper. Let's see what he has to say about us. For him, I made sure that the patient had no need before leaving the room. My nurse always made sure I had everything I needed and asked if she could do anything else for me. I really appreciate that. So that's where we get to see the consequences a little bit. I think the third item I brought up was this idea of practice. And so you saw over the course of that play, I got to practice a lot of actions multiple times. So again, making those same choices over and over again really helps to cement that content. The other thing is that most of our playtesters actually played more than once. So as game designers know, replayability is a really key part of a good game. And this is certainly for learning, that's really important. And so giving that feedback with, showing those consequences, showing you that score, restating that goal and showing that to you, again, both in terms of the score and also in terms of the overall satisfaction of the patients. We have this, nice retry button here to allow people to go back and play again. I've got 5 minutes, so at this point I'm happy to answer any questions or discuss any details. Yeah.
So I have a question about the where you are with this right now. So is it still in the testing phase, or are they using it?
So this is in pilot right now. It's in pilot across a couple of units in AHN and also in the School of Nursing there.
So what is the incentive for the nurses to use use it? Is it mandatory, or is there an incentive that they're?
So for the pilot, I believe it's voluntary, and so that part's a little difficult. But the idea is that it would become part of normal nurse training. Yeah.
The thing I'm most interested in your testing, the difference between people who sit down and accept what it's telling them and people who reject it, people who say, like, I can see through this is childish, this is not really going to help me become a better practitioner.
Yeah.
What's the mix?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. The younger nurses, first of all, I would say everyone kind of sees through it, right? Everyone, like, we don't make any claim that this is not a game about learning something. What we notice is that younger nurses are kind of okay with that they, particularly ones earlier in their career where they have, maybe a year or less under their belt, because it's speaking at a relatively basic level about the task of nursing, they kind of accept that and engage with it. Older nurses, people who have more experience, or people maybe who are even in a position of authority regarding training, people who have more subtle and nuanced understanding of the job, start to pick at it a little bit more. But even then, one of the reasons we do playtesting is to sort of move past that a little bit. And so, we did a lot of playtests with older nurses, and we got torn apart a few times for sure. But I think in the end, we were able to generate something that even as they're picking it apart, they're still engaging with it. And so that part is kind of, it's an ongoing challenge for the kind of games that we do. But it is something that I feel like we're moving past, and playtesting is obviously a key part of that. Yeah.
So you give immediate feedback when they make a wrong choice just by saying it's
Yeah.
an error. And then you give kind of an overall critique. But just as you saw out there, you weren't sure which one you chose that was wrong, and so you really wouldn't know what you did that was
Right.
wrong. Have you thought about having kind of a replay version at the end, so if they want, here's what you chose, and here's why this was a better answer that you didn't choose?
Yeah, so we thought about that, and I think some of that is a scope issue, right? Just trying to get something done in a finite amount of time and budget. The vignettes that you see at the end where the patients report back to you is a little bit like that in terms of sort of calling out more specific choices that you made. I think as a learning exercise that would be really solid. I think our philosophy is just replay the game. It's a little bit different every time, but you end up making the same choices over and over again. Also, on that one where I missed the choice, I basically wasn't reading them. So when people are playing and actually trying to make the right choice at that point, they at least know what they chose. Okay, yeah.
I noticed that, for example, this hand sanitizer wasn't a choice. They just do that every time.
Yep.
Why did you decide that one is an automated behavior versus something like the knocking is a manual?
Yeah, so that's a fun sort of client management and scoping thing, right? Every time you go to a client, they have a gazillion ideas, and so we always go back to what are the learning objectives that we stated, and our interactivity and sort of the system design around that is going to support those learning objectives. And then they always come in with other things like, the hand sanitizer, perfect example, where they came in and they said, we really, it's corporate policy that you always do hand sanitizer before you go in and out. And their thought was, let's make that a choice. And we said, well, that doesn't fit in the learning objectives that you enumerated at the beginning of the project. Let's just show it, so we're at least reinforcing the policy. In another game, that could absolutely be a choice. So it was very much something that was discussed, and yeah, it gets managed that way.
If it was like one choice too many, because you have to now choose between knocking and not knocking, or hand sanitizer, not sanitizer.
Right.
You could even engage that, like all these choices that we automatically do all the time and don't think about, versus this, they're very explicitly stated, but draws out the interaction. Right. I wondered if it was more a choice of just like overloading user with choices.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the important things about goals and in not just the goal of the game, but the goal of the project is, and so when I talk about simplicity, that's really important, right? The goals of the project focus us and allow us to manage scope, but also to manage the focus of the experience itself. And so that, obviously it would not be super hard to put in a choice about the hand sanitizer, but it's not something that relates directly to patient satisfaction. Obviously, it relates to infection, and sick patients are probably less happy, but that's a little bit of a stretch in terms of the kinds of things we were trying to teach. So we're really focused on enumerating those learning objectives up front, and then making sure that our interactivity and our system supported those things across the entirety of the experience. And everything else, we try to model in so that we're modeling the right things and not spreading bad habits, but again, trying to keep things really focused.